Random thoughts. This is another random thoughts video, and in this video, I'm going to discuss something that I find to be unacceptable, but for some reasons, most of us Kenyans have come to accept it, and maybe it's not only Kenyans, but maybe other parts of Africa is the same thing, or other countries. But I'm going to speak about Kenya. I saw a post today on Facebook where somebody was providing history, a very interesting history of Kenya. And he was talking about the events that happened in 1991 and early 1992, and maybe the entire of 1992. And this is the time when Kenya had its first multi-party elections. And towards those elections, there were very many activities, of course. There were people who were like, Moi needed to go. At this time, Moi had been in power for close to, could be 12, 13 years. And very many people were like, he needed to go. And there were, of course, candidates who had decided to run so that they become the president and, of course, remove Moi from power. Of course, there was Jaramogi, the father of Raila Odinga. There was Martin Shikuku, there was Kenneth Matiba, and then those were the first candidates to declare their interest in becoming or running against Moi. And then there was Mwai Kibaki, who actually later on took over from Moi. But this is 1991, 1992. Mwai Kibaki, during this time, was seen as a supporter of Moi, a very close supporter of his. But then at some point he switches and he decides to join the opposition, and he found the DP party. Now, going back to this post that I saw, of course, I'm giving you the summary of that history. This person was talking about the involvement of the American ambassador to Kenya in trying to make the opposition form an alliance and then pick one person who was going to face Moi. And this was Hemston. This was a guy who was called Hemston. And Hemston became one of those very loud American ambassadors in Kenya. And he got so much involved in Kenyan politics, it seemed like he was actually trying to run the country. And yeah, and this is an example of that, where this person telling this history says that he would invite the leaders of the opposition to his office and try to negotiate with them or try to help them to form an alliance and to form a single force that would face Moi and most likely or remove him from power. Now, this person wrote that there was a meeting that was held between Mwai Kibaki and Hempston, and the conversation was around how it was it could be done that the opposition had one candidate, and seems like Kibaki was very much interested in what Hempston was saying, and Hempston had talked to all these other leaders, and sometimes he would invite them in a single meeting and try to talk to them. Now, I don't think, maybe he did not portray the entire picture accurately as it happened, but that story has been told so many times, so it's not a new story. It's a story that very many people know, that during the early 1990s, Hemston, who was the American ambassador, did get involved so much into Kenyan politics, and the West in general was trying to see how either to remove Moi or to keep Moi in power, because there are also other stories that I've heard that actually some, especially maybe the UK, was interested in keeping Moi in office, and that Mwai Kibaki was actually persuaded by the either the UK or the US to run, so that to make it very difficult for the opposition to defeat Moi. But that's besides the point. Whether they wanted to keep Moi in office or to remove him from office, what I have an issue with is our attitude towards that involvement of Western countries or other people in our politics, because it should be like an ambassador is just an ambassador. They should be here to represent their country and to negotiate with the government and such things. But when an ambassador gets involved with the politics and try even to arrange how politics are going to turn out, of course they need to do that because they need to protect their interests of their countries. But it's upon the people in the country to be like, no, this is our internal affairs. You shouldn't get involved. Now, I was looking at this post and there are so many comments on the post. It's a post that kind of like went viral and it's been read by, could be thousands or even tens of thousands of people. And there were hundreds of comments. I didn't actually count them, but could be even close to 1,000 comments. And it's comments by Kenyans. And I was trying to dig through the comments, trying to find that one comment that says, hey, this was not acceptable. Yeah, Moi was, maybe Moi was not ruling the way we wanted. He was not the best. We had issues with him. Maybe he needed to be removed. But the fact that we have an ambassador of a country, another country, getting so much involved in our politics, trying to determine who runs and who becomes the president, that's not acceptable. I was trying to look for that one comment. And I really went through those comments, not entirely, but I did go through those comments and I did not find even one. If anything, what I saw that appeared often is the complaint that Hemston was not successful. People were like, "Oh, he tried, he was not successful." It's like people are like, he what he was doing was noble, was good, and it's unfortunate that he did not succeed in his campaigns. Maybe he succeeded. We never know what the Americans' goal was because with these people, you never know. You might think that this is what they are looking for. Like maybe during that time, some people might think that they were looking to remove Moi from office, but then it turns out actually that's not what they wanted. They wanted to keep him in office, and maybe they achieved that. You never know for sure. But the issue is, I'm worried when I see that very many Kenyans don't see anything wrong with that. Like they think it was proper. They even think that it's unfortunate that a foreigner or a person representing interests of another country, it's unfortunate that he did not succeed. That is sad actually because we think we became independent, but we did not become independent. Okay, it is understandable that others have refused to give us independence. That can be like, it's okay. They have to, people have to do whatever they have to do to protect their interests. And those people, the Western countries, are protecting the interests of their citizens, the interest of their companies that do businesses in Africa, things like that, the resources they need to get out of this continent. They have to do that. But the most unfortunate thing is that while we talk so proudly of fighting colonization and fighting the Mau Mau wars and chasing away the Mzungu, and then we turn around, we invite them to come and manage our politics, and nobody sees it as having any problem. Like it's okay. And these people have studied us, and I've said in another video that we Africans are studied and then controlled. And I've talked about the fascination of the Western diplomats, especially with the tribal relationships, the so-called tribal relationship or ethnic relationships in whichever country they are looking at. And their fascination with our tribal relationships is based on the need to exploit them. And I can argue that sometimes they even stock those negative feelings between different groups of people and then they exploit them. We end up hating one another so much that it becomes easy for us, or at least some of us, to support a foreign ambassador or an ambassador of another country to get involved in our politics in ways that are completely not acceptable. It does not matter from which point you are looking at it. But because we end up hating one another so much, we are blinded from that. And that actually, even now, is possible that there are people, for example, who will hate or who dislike maybe the current president so much. But they, which is, of course, is democracy, and we need to continue with that culture that if we don't like someone, they are not doing what we ask them to do or what they told us they were going to do, we should organize our votes and we kick them out. That's how democracy works, and that should happen if it has to happen. But what we should not encourage is to encourage others to join us in doing that. That's dangerous. That's giving up our independence. And sometimes we think we know what's actually happening, but you are seeing what you are allowed to see. You don't know what happens in the boardrooms, what happens in meetings that are held at night in Runda or Muthaiga or some of these places where diplomats will meet and Kenyan officials of Kenyan government and Kenyan politicians. You don't know what goes on in those meetings. So you see what you are allowed to see. So for most of us, it should not be okay. We should have the culture of like, this is our own issue here. It's a local issue. You should not get involved. If we are going to vote somebody out, we do it by ourselves because we've decided we don't need them in. We want somebody else to take over. That should be our business. But when we end up being blinded so much with dislike of other people, such that we invite others who we imagine are friends, they are not friends. They are here to exploit and to take whatever they can take. So yeah, so it's very, very unfortunate. Those are my random thoughts.